My in-laws watched me bury my child, then circled like vultures over the only thing I had left, my café. While I couldn't breathe through the grief, they were drafting paperwork, smiling over signatures they knew I was too broken to read. But I wasn't gone. I was just quiet. And while they were busy building an empire on my ashes, I was planning a reckoning they'd never see coming. One that would make them wish they'd left me with nothing at all. I buried my baby on a Thursday. By Sunday, my in-laws were already drafting contracts to take my café. Not condolences, not comfort, just contracts. People say grief makes you hallucinate, that the mind can't fully process loss, so it wraps it in fog. But I remember that weekend with perfect clarity. The silence of the nursery, the unused bottles on the counter, the scent of warm milk still lingering in the air like a ghost. And them, Vivian, Brandon, Lindsay, huddled at the kitchen island like vultures in pearl necklaces and pressed collars, murmuring about next steps and efficiency and how the business couldn't wait on my healing. I didn't eat, I didn't sleep. I just sat in my café at dawn, watching the light crawl across the mural I painted myself, the one my daughter had touched with sticky fingers after her first birthday cake. That café was more than a business. It was where I brewed hope, where I found myself again after postpartum depression, where I poured every ounce of love into every cup I served. But they didn't see any of that. They saw opportunity. Vivian, my mother-in-law, called it help, said I shouldn't worry about the paperwork, said she'd keep things running smoothly. Brandon asked for access to the business account just in case. Lindsay, who'd never worked a shift in her life, posted a photo of herself behind the counter with the caption, "Family first, keeping the legacy alive." And I just stared at my phone screen, numb, watching them erase me in real time. I don't even remember signing the papers. I must have been wearing black. I must have still been bleeding. I must have thought they were helping. But the truth is, I was grieving and they were stealing. They didn't just take my café. They took the last thing I had left to fight for. And they smiled while doing it, like I should thank them for the favor. But here's the thing, they forgot about broken women. We remember. They thought I was finished, that I'd wither quietly in the corner, wrapped in grief, too shattered to lift my head. But I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. Before you think it couldn't get any crueler than stealing from a grieving mother, ask yourself this: what if betrayal didn't end with contracts, but continued with silence, erasure, and cold smiles across a coffee cup? Stay with me. You haven't heard the worst yet. I hadn't checked the books in weeks. The numbers didn't matter to me anymore. Nothing did, not after I scattered Anna's ashes in the garden behind the café. I barely remembered to eat. I forgot birthdays, lost track of time, stared at her favorite cup on the shelf like it might speak. So when Brandon handed me a folder of routine documents, said they were just to keep things afloat, while I took time to heal, I didn't ask questions. I signed. I signed like someone underwater, slow, unblinking, too numb to notice the current dragging her under. The changes came quietly, subtle at first. My login stopped working. I assumed it was a glitch. Then my email bounced back. The shared drive disappeared. The team group chat went silent, like I'd suddenly become invisible. Even Lydia stopped texting. I thought maybe she was giving me space, or maybe I had asked her to, and forgotten. That's what grief does. It warps everything, even memory. It wasn't until I walked into the café one Monday morning that the truth slapped me in the face. My name was still etched on the glass door, just as I painted it 3 years ago. But inside, everything was wrong. The smell, the color, the sound. My warm walnut tables had been swapped for sleek black metal. The handwritten chalkboard menu was replaced with some sterile digital screen. The house blend? Gone. In its place was something sour, flat, utterly forgettable. Even the cups were different. Cold. Corporate. I stood in the middle of the room, disoriented, like a ghost haunting the home she once loved. Then Vivian appeared from behind the counter, lifting a cup to her lips with all the smugness of a woman sipping victory. "Oh, Emma," she said, her voice dripping with pretend concern. "We thought it'd be best if you took an extended break. For your mental health, of course." I looked at her, looked at Brandon, who was tapping away on the register, and Lindsay filming a TikTok near the pastries. Like I didn't exist, like I had never existed. No one called, no one checked, no one asked if I wanted to step away. They just took the keys and turned the lock. They deleted me with pastel smiles and polished shoes. And the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how easy it had been for them to erase me. If someone erased your name from everything you built, would you walk away, or would you find a way to rewrite the story? What happened next wasn't just survival. It was a quiet revolution. And it all started with a whisper behind a closed door. It happened by accident. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was just trying to breathe. The kitchen at Vivian's house was always the quietest place after dinner, and I needed a moment away from the polite murmurs and the forced smiles. That's when I heard them. Vivian's voice, sharp like the clink of her teaspoon against porcelain, floating through the hallway. She really thought that little shop was her legacy, she scoffed. Now it's our prototype. We'll have a dozen open by next spring. And then Lindsay's giggle, too loud, too mean. She's not even a person anymore, just a crying corpse in beige cardigans. I stood there, frozen behind the wall, every word slicing deeper than the last. They weren't just proud of what they'd taken, they were entertained by it. My pain had become their punchline. I left without saying a word, drove home with the windows down, even though the night was cold. My fingers trembled on the steering wheel, not from grief this time, but from clarity. I unlocked the drawer I hadn't opened since Anna passed. Inside was the weathered recipe journal, pages smudged with cinnamon and hope. These were the drinks my daughter and I perfected together. They didn't know the real recipes. They never would. Next, I opened the old fireproof safe. I had forgotten how heavy it was, how metallic the combination dial felt against my palm. But the numbers came back easily. My hands might have been shaking, but my memory was steady. Inside, the emergency fund sat untouched, still enough to spark something new. And buried beneath a stack of outdated vendor invoices, I found it. Lydia Nguyen's business card. Crisp, white, deliberate. She'd given it to me during our last winter promotion, after she left her agency job. If you ever want to rebuild, she had said, call me. I believe in people who bleed for what they make. I stared at that card for a long time before I picked up the phone. She answered on the first ring. That night, we didn't talk revenge. We talked strategy. I wasn't going back to salvage what they stole. I was going to build something they couldn't even imitate. Something with soul. I wasn't confused. I wasn't delusional. And I damn sure wasn't dead. I was awake. And I was about to rewrite the ending. Now that she had a plan, the question was, how do you strike back without ever raising your voice? If you've ever wanted to see what justice looks like in a well-tailored suit, keep watching. The first domino is about to fall. The first call I made was to a lawyer, someone who had once been a regular at my café, back when we still brewed everything in small batches and people lined up for the lavender caramel latte. His name was Michael, quiet, precise, the kind of man who never stirred his coffee, just sipped it once and set the cup down like a closing argument. When I told him what had happened, I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I simply said, I need you to look at some documents. I think they stole something they can't legally own. We went through everything. Transaction records, signed authorizations, the vague business continuity, forms Brandon had me sign while I was still half sedated by grief. Michael read them all in silence. Then he looked up and said, there's a case here. And more importantly, there's leverage. Over the next few days, I gathered everything I had. Screenshots of emails where they promised temporary assistance, meeting notes with timestamps, photos of Lindsay proudly posting their new concept cafe while still using my logo. And the menu, oh, the menu. They hadn't even bothered to rename half the drinks. They just stripped away the soul, kept the skeleton, and hoped no one would notice. But here's the thing about art. People can feel when it's real, and they can smell a fraud from a mile away. Michael sent the first email on a Wednesday morning. It was simple, clinical, and lethal. A formal cease and desist, citing unauthorized use of copyrighted recipes, branding elements, and proprietary design created solely by his client, me. It demanded the immediate removal of all infringing material and warned of further legal action if they failed to comply. I didn't see their faces when they read it, but I heard the panic in their response. Vivian's "we were just trying to help" email. Brandon's veiled threats about public image and family loyalty. Lindsay's radio silence. They didn't expect me to fight. They expected silence, shame, maybe even a breakdown. Instead, I gave them law. "No, I don't want a settlement," I told Michael. "I want a storm, one they can't outrun." And then I added quietly, without a smile, "I don't want to go legal. I want to go biblical." That was my first strike. Not a scream, just the whisper of something bigger coming. You've seen the spark. Now, are you ready to watch the fire spread? This isn't just revenge. It's a masterclass in reclaiming power. And trust me, you'll want to witness the moment they realize. She's not coming to beg. She's coming to compete. I didn't need a billboard. I didn't need a press release. All I needed was one video, 2 minutes, one camera, my voice. No filters, no script, just me, sitting in the corner of a brand new cafe with walls I painted myself and shelves lined with ceramic mugs I molded by hand during the long nights grief wouldn't let me sleep. I looked straight into the lens and said, "I lost my daughter. Then I lost the place I built with her laughter in every brick. But I still have these hands. And they still know how to build." That was all. We named the new place Nest Reborn. No mention of Brew Nest, no lawsuits, no name-calling. But anyone who had ever tasted my mocha, anyone who ever watched Anna spin on the bar stools while I worked the espresso machine, they knew. They came, quiet at first, then in flocks. One woman wept when she tasted the original lavender roast again. A man whispered, "You are the only cafe that knew my name. They took that from us." Meanwhile, across town, their chain expansion stumbled. People noticed the watered-down drinks, the formulaic decor, the plastic smiles from underpaid staff wearing uniforms 2 sizes too tight. Review after review called it out for what it was, a soulless imitation of something that used to mean something. And then the headline hit, "Cafe Empire built on grief and stolen recipes." The article didn't name names, but it didn't have to. Customers connected the dots. Comments flooded in. Stories, photos, screenshots, memories. Suddenly, it wasn't just about coffee. It was about betrayal, about legacy, about theft disguised as family. Their revenue dropped 40% in 1 week. I heard Brandon threw his phone at a wall, that Vivian held an emergency meeting and left it red-faced, silent. Lindsay deleted all her CEO life reels and went off-grid for 3 days. I didn't respond. I didn't gloat. I brewed coffee because I didn't come for revenge. I came to reclaim my name. And they were finally learning the difference between stealing something and earning it. Chateau. You thought her comeback was powerful? What she does next will leave you stunned. This isn't just a counterattack. It's a statement. A message printed in every cup and carved into the pride of those who wronged her. Ready for the most poetic move yet? I didn't just want them to lose. I wanted them to see it, feel it, every time they looked out their flagship window. So I leased the space right next door. Prime real estate, just a few feet from the heart of the empire they built on grief and thievery. I called it poetic proximity. The grand opening wasn't grand at all. No fireworks, no influencers, just soft jazz, fresh scones, and a line of customers that wrapped around the block by noon. We didn't need a gimmick. We had something stronger, truth. And every cup we served bore a quiet, undeniable message. The original always tastes different. We printed it on the sleeves, etched it into the wall behind the bar, whispered it with every pour of our signature mocha, the same one they diluted into something flavorless and cheap. This wasn't just coffee. This was memory, integrity, proof that some things can't be copied, no matter how many recipes you steal. And just to twist the knife with elegance, I hosted a free workshop in our new space the following week. The topic? Protecting your worth. How to keep thieves from signing on your behalf. We filled the seats with young entrepreneurs, baristas, even lawyers. Local press picked it up, then national. One article called me the Cafe Phoenix. Another ran the headline, From Ashes to Espresso, How a Widow Reclaimed Her Flame. I didn't speak their names. I didn't need to. But I saw them, standing behind their glass, watching the line outside my door grow longer with each passing hour. Their store, just feet away, sat nearly empty. Baristas scrolling on their phones, tables unbussed, customers wandering in, then quietly backing out. They saw the difference. And they knew. I hadn't taken back what they stole. I'd built something new, something radiant and unshakable, something they could never kill. I didn't need to haunt them. I became their morning view. And every sunrise after that was mine. Justice has been served, but healing is its own journey. If you've ever lost something and had to rebuild from nothing, this next chapter is for you. Because sometimes the softest scenes are where the real strength lives. The first spring after everything ended, I planted lavender outside the new cafe. Just 3 pots by the window. Nothing extravagant, just enough to catch the breeze. I didn't tell anyone why, but I knew. Anna used to lean over my shoulder every time I brewed a batch of lavender syrup. "More, Mama," she'd whisper, like it was a secret only we shared. The day those flowers bloomed again, it felt like she was whispering to me one more time. I stood there in the early morning light, coffee in one hand, watering can in the other, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel hollow. I felt held. Within a year, we had 3 more cafes open. None of them flashy, none of them oversized. Just warm spaces with soft light, quiet corners, and shelves of books people could borrow or leave behind. Each one had a nook we called the Mother's Bench, a cozy corner with a single, plush armchair, a reading lamp, and a framed sign that read, "For the ones who carry memories instead of children." It wasn't a marketing move. It was a promise, a sanctuary, and people came, sometimes just to sit, sometimes to cry, sometimes to say nothing at all. We brewed with care. We greeted people by name. We made space for healing. One afternoon, I was wiping down the bar when a little girl with soft curls and chocolate on her chin tugged at my apron. Her mother was browsing a small rack of handmade cards near the register. The girl looked up and said, "Miss Emma, your cafe smells like a hug." My throat tightened. I blinked fast. I smiled. "That's exactly what we're going for," I whispered. I didn't need headlines anymore. The world had already watched the fall of those who tried to silence me. Now, I was more interested in the quiet victories, the small, sacred ones, like a stranger finishing their cup and leaving a thank you note on the counter. Like an old man who came in every Wednesday just to sit in the sunlit seat by the window. Like Lydia, who'd become more than my marketing partner. She was family now. She stopped by every Sunday morning with croissants and the newest ideas she'd scribbled on napkins. We didn't talk strategy much anymore. We talked about life, about rebuilding, about what it meant to love something so much that you'd fight for it and still find room to forgive. My home changed too. I replaced the sterile walls with warm paint, hung up old photographs again, not just of Anna, but of life after. Friends who stood by me, laughing moments captured in blurry motion. I started cooking again. Not because I had to, but because it brought people together. Neighbors started dropping by, even when the porch light was off. I kept a kettle on the stove at all times, just in case. The smell of cinnamon and rosemary became part of the air. Vivian, Brandon, and Lindsay. I never saw them again, but I didn't need to. I heard through someone that their F&B chain was sold off piecemeal. That Brandon tried to pitch a new brand, but no investor would touch it. That Lindsay moved to another city and went quiet online. that Vivian now hosts charity teas from her living room, desperately clinging to the illusion of control. But that's not my story anymore. That chapter closed itself, quietly, just like that door I never opened again. My story now lives in the laughter of customers, the hum of grinders at 6 a.m., the way the city smells when the first roast of the day is brewing. I still wear the same leather apron, stained with years of work and memory. Still tie my hair back the same way. But I'm not the same woman they tried to erase. I'm the one who rose from it, the one who kept walking forward until the silence became music again. Justice didn't come with a courtroom. It came with healing, with new roots, with peace so profound it doesn't need to be proven. It simply lived. And that, more than anything they ever took from me, is what I reclaimed. And what about them? The ones who thought they'd won? Don't worry. You don't need to lift a sword when time delivers the sharpest cuts. Watch closely. This is how guilt unravels, all on its own. It didn't happen all at once, Anu. That's the part no one tells you. When a storm takes down a house, it looks sudden, violent, theatrical. But when arrogance collapses, when cruelty turns inward and rots its own roots, the fall is quiet, excruciatingly slow, and completely unavoidable. It started with whispers behind closed doors. Investors pulling out, first one, then 3 more. Nobody made a statement, but everyone knew. The numbers didn't lie. Their flagship store, the jewel of their so-called empire, had been hemorrhaging money for months. Patrons had stopped coming. Staff had stopped caring. Supplies were inconsistently delivered, and returns became routine. Brandon tried to charm his way out of it, but charisma doesn't refill empty seats. Lindsay attempted damage control on social media, filming reels with forced smiles, overly cheerful captions, and desperate hashtags. But comments told the real story: watered-down drinks, rude staff, tasteless food, and a desperate attempt to mimic something they never created in the first place. And then came the headline that sealed their fate. Café copycats. How a stolen brand lost its soul and its customers. It trended for days, not because it was scandalous, but because it was true. Thousands of people shared their experiences, comparing what the cafe used to be under my hand and what it had become under theirs. The contrast was damning. No one needed me to say a word. Their downfall spoke louder than I ever could. Behind the scenes, things turned uglier. Vivian and Lindsay, once a united front in manipulation, began to fracture. Blame is easy when your ego is bruised. Vivian accused Lindsay of overextending the brand, of turning it into a parody with her influencer antics. Lindsay retaliated by saying she never wanted to run anything, that she only followed Vivian's plan because she'd been promised success and validation. Meetings turned into shouting matches. Eventually, Lindsay packed a single suitcase and left town. No goodbye, no announcement, just gone. Vivian stayed, but not by choice. She held court in her cold, cavernous house, sipping tea alone in a room no one visited. The calls stopped. The invites dried up. People who once begged for her attention now crossed the street to avoid her. The phone rang less. Then, not at all. One by one, the lights went off in her world. Not because someone flipped the switch, but because no one cared to keep them on. Brandon's fall was less graceful. He tried to spin a new venture, leveraging what was left of their name, but no one invested. His reputation as a smooth-talking opportunist had spread. His charm, once magnetic, now felt like a threat. Even those who didn't know the whole story knew enough to stay away. He started showing up at networking events uninvited, pitching half-formed ideas to uninterested ears. At one panel, someone introduced him as the guy who tried to turn grief into a franchise. He left mid-session, face pale and jaw clenched. Their flagship store eventually closed. No press release, no farewell sale. Just a sign that read, temporarily closed for renovation. But renovation never came. Weeks turned into months. Dust collected behind the windows. Flyers curled at the corners. Someone spray-painted over the door. Real can't be replicated. No one cleaned it off. Online, the narrative had crystallized. They weren't just failed business owners. They were the ones who stole and still lost. Reddit threads dissected their downfall. Articles labeled them as cautionary tales. A popular meme dubbed them the copycat café and the copycat collapse. Their legacy had been rewritten, and this time I didn't write a word of it. And me, I passed their old location one morning, walking to a community meeting about local entrepreneurship grants. I paused, just for a second, outside the shuttered door. I could feel someone watching from the upstairs window. I didn't turn. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. Because the worst punishment is not being destroyed by your enemy. It's being forced to live beside their success. They weren't banned from the industry. They were erased from it. And all I had to do was continue building what they could never touch. You've seen the fall. Now let me show you the rise. Not loud, not vengeful, just radiant. This is where the story doesn't end. It evolves. And maybe, just maybe, it becomes something greater than pain. I didn't rebuild the old cafe. I didn't want it back. Not really. What I wanted was to reclaim something deeper. My name, my story, my voice. That's why I founded the Cup of Resilience, a small foundation with a bold purpose, to help women who've been broken by life, grief, betrayal, or silence. Not with pity, but with the tools to stand back up. We provide micro-grants, mentorship, emotional support, a place to be seen and not pitied, to be heard and not corrected, to be believed. We don't start with business plans. We start with stories. Women come in with nothing but pain, and they leave with a blueprint, some for bakeries, some for bookstores, some for gardens. But all of them are built on truth, and that makes them indestructible. I never made a public statement about what happened to me. I never went on television. I never named names. I didn't need to. My legacy wasn't shaped by how I clapped back. It was shaped by what I chose to build after the fire. And no, I didn't forgive them. Not in the way people expect. I didn't wake up one day and let it all go. Forgiveness, for me, was not absolution. It was removal, a choice to let their names rot in silence while mine found light. Sometimes, people ask me if I ever miss what I had before. The first cafe, the family I thought I belonged to. My answer is always the same. They took the first version of my dream, yes, but they underestimated what I could do with the ashes. Now, there are things no one can take. Not anymore. Not the way a mother holds grief, like muscle memory. Not the way I know my coffee beans by scent alone. Not the way a child's voice echoes in your mind long after it's gone. It didn't make me cry. It made me still. There's a difference. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to keep building to stay standing. I was already standing, on something solid, on something real. And now, on most mornings, I wake up early. I tie my apron, even if no one's around. I grind beans with the window open so the scent travels into the street. I steam the milk slowly, like it's a ritual. Then I carry my cup outside, onto the porch, into the quiet. I sit beneath the soft reach of the fig tree I planted when I thought I'd never plant anything again. I take a sip. I don't toast to revenge or victory. I just breathe, because pain didn't end me. It redefined me. Thank you for staying with me through every twist, every silence, every fight. If this story stirred something in you or reminded you of your own strength, please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me again for the next story that deserves to be heard.